Now we will see the next part of it. Now, the interwar economy. Now, this is regarding the First World War. Okay, they were given poor living and working conditions as well as very less rights. Yes, even wages were less. Yeah, effects of the First World War. So, as I said, interwar economy. So, the First World War and what was the conditions, like how the world faced the First World War, what were the consequences, effects of the First World. Now let's stop talk about the yesterday's PPT and concentrate on today's PPT. Okay. Now the period between the two world wars, that is the first and the second, was that of global economic and political instability. Yes, anybody? If you have read the textbook, Allied powers means which countries were there in the Allied powers in the First World War? Okay. Yes, Great France, oh, Britain, Great Britain, Russia, France. So, all these, three of them were the Allied powers. Okay. And the Central powers. Now, which were the Central powers? Germany, Hungary, correct. Turkey, I guess it was in there. In Europe, near Germany, Hungary, there's a phrase you can say associated with Hungary. Bul- Bulgaria, okay, yes, Bulgaria is also there. Yes, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Ottoman Empire. Okay, so all these were the central powers. Now, this you have to remember it as it is said also in the PPT. Remember who they were. So, you come to know like in between which countries there was a war and there was conflicts. Okay, so allied power and the central power, and this can be asked like who were the allied powers in World War One. Okay, or the First World War. So you have to have the answer for this for 1 month, and even it can be same asked for central powers also. So again, that question also will carry 1 mark. So this is important from the MCQ or the objective type of question. So you need to remember this. Okay. So the Allied and the Central Powers engaged in the uh, world's first ever industrial war, that is First World War. A lot of machinery and weapons were manufactured during this period. So, what were the factories put up in the First World War? Was about the weapons, to produce the weapons, to produce the machineries which were used for war related equipments. Okay, soldiers from all over the world were recruited, and a majority belonging to the working population. So now apart from this, now the common people, how they were suffering, that they were forcibly taken either in military or to the plantation for working. Okay, there was a situation when these plantation workers were also being forcibly added to the or recruited to the army. Okay, whoever the power was, whoever the colonial rule was, irrespective to whether it was Britain. But if we see to India, Britain did this. Okay, England or Europe, sorry, Britain, British people did force Indian people from plantation as well as from the country to join the army. They were recruited forcefully in the army. The death toll was great during the war. Means lot many people were had died in this war because it was the first world war, and it was not with the swords and weapons like these, but the machines, guns were also used in this. Okay, so thus causing a woman to step in to do the men's job as they needed to sustain the household. So when the man or head of the family, you can say, or the working person of the family is dead, so what is the alternative left in the hand of the wife? She steps out and she takes jobs that the men were doing to fulfill her as well, her stomach as well as her child's stomach. Okay, to sustain, to remain alive. Okay, for this she has to do such work. During this period, Britain borrowed heavily from the US. America became the lender, that is the creditor, giver, as opposed to its earlier role as a borrower. So, priorly, America was borrowing money for some or the other purpose, but now they were becoming so strong. Why? Because Britain were losing. Britain, like the weapons, the cost of weapons, as well as afterwards the medicinal uh, services were given to the soldiers. So there also they have to invest for the medicines. Okay, for manufacturing the dresses, all these things Britain had to suffer a lot losses. Okay, so he was heavily in debt, and then he Britain started borrowing from America, who was primarily a borrower, ask debtor, or we can say asking for money, and now turning after the First World War, it turned to be the giver, the creditor. Okay, got it? So now we will proceed. Now, development of industries in India and Japan further added to Britain's misery. Unemployment does hit Britain quite hard. Now, whatever the colonies were, Britain had already explored them. Okay, undue advantage has been taken by them. More of the recruitment was done, but finally it was like many losses also Britain has to suffer. Now it was like there was unemployment because there was nobody to get recruited. Okay, so very hard conditions for Britain. Now the recovery of the economy. Now this was like you can see with all these losses, there was a loss of economy also. Like many places they had invested and did not get returns. They thought Britain thought that with this war we will gain some more land, but that was not the case. And finally, whatever investment was done by them, they did not get the returns of it. So now the economy was very weak. So, how to recover that economy? Let us see. The US, on the other hand, managed to recover the war losses quite quickly. Henry Ford, the car manufacturer, set a mass production system into motion, allowing a higher worker outputs. Now, here it was like as this is when did the First World War take place? Can you type the year? Yes, correct. 1914 to 1918. So that was a peak time for industrialization. Industrialization doesn't mean that only production of the weapons, right? There were many machines coming up like the cars, which were new to the market, which were giving comfort to the people, and there was a demand for that. So what happened is in US, Henry Ford. He started a car manufacturing and selling the cars not only in America but all over the world. So the losses what USA or US United States faced that were recovered very quickly. As compared to Britain, Britain was not that much capable of starting the industries as well as production of something such that which has been demand by the world. Okay, so this was the differences why US was healed up the losses of the World War rather than the other countries of the world. Now, this method spread across Europe, and items of great durability soon came to be produced through mass production. Now, mass production here, what do you understand by mass production? Like the production takes place in shifts. Okay, one person, if you keep one shift is for a specific time of 7 to 8 hours. Okay, so producing it in more with more number of laborers throughout 24 hours, like three shifts if we say first, that is the morning, afternoon and night shift. So the production is on and on, it is not stopped. So after looking at the example of Henry Ford, even the Europeans started the industries where the items were durable, which were not perishable, which did not get easily spoiled, destroyed. Okay, such productions were started with the help of mass production. However, the US was soon hit by the Great Depression in 1929. So now what is the Great Depression? We'll see that. Next one. We have studied how US underwent a huge economic crisis when Wall Street collapsed and people quickly sold off their shares. So what is Wall Street? Company of what? Yes, anybody? It's a company, but of what? Share company. Okay, it's a share company. It was a share company rather. Okay. Yeah. So the shares of this company started collapsing. Collapsing means they were not in demand, and they were sold off with, like, there was no what you can say, profit in those shares. Okay. So what happened is the people who had taken the shares, they started giving up the shares, selling off the shares. Okay. With this, US faced a very great loss in this, and they faced the economic crisis also. With this situation of the shares coming down, the value getting reduced. Okay. Now, the US backing out of the loans is what dispersing affected all the other countries, partly or wholly dependent on it. As we have seen that now US was giving, he was a creditor, he was giving out loans to other countries. But with its own economy getting collapsed, okay, he was like US was not in a position to give out loans. So even the countries which were dependent either partly or wholly on US were also in uh, depression or in losses because they were not getting money. Okay. As a result, the bank sector collapsed and shocking number of banks shut shops in US. So the banks became bankrupt during the Great Depression. Many of the banks, they were shut down. Even in the pandemic, you must have seen around you, right? That priorly there were shops, different shops. And now after pandemic, when you go out, you see that priorly it was some article or a variety shop, and now it has turned out to be snacks or bakery or something else, right? So there was a sudden change. The same way, like that shop is shut down means it has been now taken by someone else. But in the same way, the banks were also shut down. Okay, so that was the condition. Yeah, Shubham Deshpande. So with this pandemic also, there were up and down in the shares. Yes, I agree to that. Yeah. So yeah, now so we will see India and the Great Depression. Now we have seen what happened in Europe, okay, as well as US. Now, how India was like affected with the Great Depression. India's trade of exporting agriculture goods and importing manufactured goods was cut by half during the Great Depression. Okay, so with the strike of the Great Depression in America and its results over Europe, what has happened is the export. Now, agriculture goods, as they did not have money to spend or to purchase, they they did not, like, they made it half. The export quantity was made half of the agricultural goods, as well as the manufacturing stopped. Unemployment was there, so import of manufactured goods were also reduced to half. Okay, so this is how India suffered with the Great Depression. Now the working class borrowed heavily to meet the revenue demands and fell into debt trap. Now the colonial rules, they had revenues, right? They were increasing the revenues to fulfill their economy. But with this, what happened? The people, the working class, went into debt, and it was not only one debt; it was a debt trap. So like year after year the debt was increasing, the loan was increasing, right? Now at this juncture, at this situation, Mahatma Gandhi entered the scene and launched the civil disobedience movement. Okay, so this, though the making of global world, the topic is making of global world, right? The chapter name. Now here you have the evidence of like you have the clue for nationalism in India also. So you have to remember the situations and not the chapter as whole. Okay. So what happened, when, how, you have to get that thoroughly. Okay. So there was a Great Depression which struck the world in 1929, and at that time, at that situation, Mahatma Gandhi entered and the scene and launched the civil disobedience movement. What is a civil disobedience movement? The rules and regulations they won't follow, or they won't work. Yes, boycotted foreign goods, correct, as well as they gave up the authorities also, right? The lawyers were not working, the teachers were not working, they gave up their services, the government services. The people who were recruited there, they resigned, right? That is civil disobedience movement, isn't it? So you need to read from the beginning of page 92 till the end of page 97.
If you like our videos, do share them and subscribe to our channel. If you want awesome quizzes, write to us. Keep watching and keep learning with Walnut.